Hi, and welcome to the Comic Anthologist once again. And if you are just coming in for the first time, please hit the subscribe button to show your support. Now, today we are going to talk about Spider-Man's main nemesis, Venom.
Yeah, obviously, because you can see the sweatshirts and the hoodies we got that are Venom based.
We're just trying to just show our support of the film.
And plus, the film was good. But we'll talk about that later on in this particular episode.
Now, mind you, and that's the thing I'm going to say about this, is that Venom originally started off as an alien costume that made its first appearance during Marvel Superheroes Secret War back in 1984, issue number 8. Where Spider-Man's costume had went into tatters after going into a major battle with the villains who they were fighting against on Battleworld. Now, mind you, he went inside a room to get a new costume, just like Thor and
She-Hulk.
Oh, She-Hulk.
It was Thor and She-Hulk, and basically,
yeah.
I don't want to interject or step on what you're talking about, but Thor and She-Hulk came out with brand new costumes as well because their costumes got ripped up just as much as Spider-Man's. And he was thinking like, oh, okay, which machine it was to get to the alien costume? I mean,
exactly.
Just get to basically fix his costume, his traditional red and blue costume. But instead, he went to a machine inadvertently, because he didn't ask for help or anything, inadvertently basically put his head to the machine, and then this big black round glob just came out of it, or it just appeared on there. And so he touched it, and basically it dissolved his red and blue costume immediately, right away. And I think it was also subconsciously influenced by the Spider-Woman that was with him during the Secret Wars on Battleworld back in the day.
Right, because they had changed Spider-Woman's costume to black and white at that time, so that was the heavy influence in terms of why the costume looks the way it did.
Right.
But at that time, we did not know that was going to be the alien symbiote. That wasn't revealed until much, much later, until he got back from Battleworld with having the Fantastic Four look after his costume after some time and found out that the suit was alive.
Now, with that, I don't mean to interject or whatever, but the black costume came about, which will eventually be known as Venom, came about through a contest that Marvel had put out back in, I would say, between 82 and 84, around that time.
I think it was 1983.
Or 83.
1983.
And there was this guy named Randy Schueller that he just basically designed the black and white costume for Spider-Man. And Jim Shooter, the editor-in-chief at Marvel at the time, bought it for the amount of $220.
$220?
$220.
$220 is not a lot in the grand scheme of things, considering that was almost 40 years ago. But we're talking, what, 33?
Right now, at this point, yeah, it was, no.
35 years ago.
Yeah, 35, 36 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, 35 years ago. That was paltry compared to what the dividends that the costume and its concept has made for Marvel over these last 3 decades.
And see, the cool thing about it is, once Spider-Man came back to Earth with the storylines, then the other creators, to kind of help shape the costume and its abilities while Spider-Man was wearing the costume, you had Ron Frenz, you had Ron Frenz, Tom DeFalco, Mike Zeck. Those writers were helping shape the idea of the black costume.
Exactly.
But this is the clincher. When Spider-Man discovered that the costume wasn't good for him and it was alive, and it tried to bond with him permanently, basically then Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four let him know, after he ran a whole bunch of tests and everything, Reed Richards basically had him take off the costume, and right when he was trying to take it off, he was trying to bond with him, so Reed Richards shot the costume with a sonic blaster.
Right.
And so basically the costume felt rejected because it emotionally had bonded to Peter Parker as well. And so eventually the costume escaped.
And it developed hatred for Peter Parker, but it knew his loves, it knew his powers, and it knew his spider sense. That's another thing we're about to talk about.
And it also mimicked his spider powers
in terms of climbing on walls
and shooting out webs or whatnot.
Exactly.
And so the thing was, the other part of Venom, because Venom is two parts. The other part is Eddie Brock, and he's a reporter that was working on a crime story at the time, dealing with this character known as the Sin Eater. And so basically, he had his sources wrong, I should say. Once the sources were discovered to be wrong after he wrote the story, and everyone thought that what he wrote was gospel and everything was, he thought everything was cool. Spider-Man found the real culprit, the real Sin Eater, which basically, through his story, basically got thrown in the trash. And then
the newspaper had to issue a retraction as a result of what he did.
Right.
So that way they could basically make amends, so that way they wouldn't be sued for libel.
And see, the crazy part is that Eddie Brock was found himself basically unemployed or whatnot. So he was forced to write like venomous articles for like rag newspapers, something to the equivalent of like
the National Enquirer
or
the Daily Star,
or basically sensational newspapers that you see now.
Yes.
That you see in your like typical grocery store news rack. And so basically, when he was forced to do that, he was contemplating suicide at the time because it just got so bad for him that everything wasn't going well for him.
Couldn't pay his bills.
His ex-wife left him. And so the only way to get that aggression out or his hatred of Spider-Man out of the system at the time was to lift weights. But then once he was planning on committing suicide. The crazy part is that around that time or near that time, Spider-Man was trying to get the costume made its way back to Spider-Man and tried to bond with him again. And so what happened is basically Spider-Man went into the church
and got near the church bell, and basically the church bell gonged so loud and so strongly that it forced the symbiote. You've seen this in Spider-Man 3, because he took that costume and he knew the Sonics were going to affect it. So he took that costume and it basically got hurt so badly it left Peter Parker. But at the same time,
it pulled him away to safety. Once it pulled him away to safety, then it went and disappeared and just lied in wait while it was still weak or whatnot. But then it fed off or sensed the emotions of Eddie Brock of his wanting to commit suicide. So he turned around and bonded with Eddie Brock in that church.
Yes.
And so that's how Venom was born. So then in two particular key issues, when Eddie Brock was doing his thing with Spider-Man, he didn't set off Spider-Man's spider sense.
And that's because the costume was able to know how to negate Peter Parker's spider sense.
Being bonded was temporarily being bonded to Peter Parker for so long, or during that time that he was with him, but not permanently bond. But the crazy part is, the first time was Peter Parker was standing on a subway train, and he got, and this is in Web of Spider-Man number 18 back in the day, and basically Eddie Brock shoved Peter Parker out onto the train tracks
to have him get killed by the train as it was coming. And Peter Parker was wondering, how come I couldn't sense this? Normally, if somebody's about to attack me, he would sense it.
Right,
but he did not know.
And the second time was when Peter Parker was swinging around the city and he got close to his apartment. A black hand came and grabbed him and threw him straight through the window and then disappeared. And he was trying to figure out, who's doing this to me and how come my spider sense couldn't detect it? So it finally came to a head eventually in Amazing Spider-Man 299. And so she was so traumatized by that because she thought that was Peter coming into the house like, are you home, baby? Honey, are you home? And imagine coming into a house or into your apartment and the lights are pitch black or whatever. You turn on the lights and you're thinking that's your husband walking through the door.
That's cold.
And so right when he's walking through the door or he's lying in wait and thinking like, well, what are you doing? Why are you doing a heavy breathing? And all of a sudden, this like evil grin just pops up on the black costume that Peter Parker was normally wearing, but she didn't know at the time. That traumatized her to no end.
And as a result, Peter Parker had to burn up his black costume after the battle that he had with Venom.
Right.
Just so that way she wouldn't have the reminder of that costume coming back into their lives again.
Right, exactly.
So he went back to the red and blue back in the day, but that was the event that changed everything back to the status quo of him wearing that red and blue costume.
And so now the character has gained his own popularity as a result because he has had his own limited series from back in the day.
And that's the next question I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
What is your most favorite Venom story?
My most favorite Venom story, I would have to say, Knights of Vengeance.
Knights of Vengeance?
Yeah, and that deals with Venom going toe to toe with the evil version of the Ghost Rider, which we also talked about Ghost Rider before.
Right. Yes.
And eventually they had to team up against like an alien foe because they were being hunted down, and the guys that were hunting them down, basically they found this alien tech crashed on Earth in the books, but they were like, oh yeah, let's use this alien tech, and yeah, we're gonna catch Spider-Man, or we're not gonna catch Spider-Man, we're gonna catch Venom, and we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. The alien tech basically rewrote their personalities and took them completely over, and then made them less than human. As each of the issues progressed, they became less and less human until there was nothing left of them being human.
Wow.
So basically that alien tech assimilated them. And so that's like my favorite story. What about yours?
Mine would still have to be the first one, which would be Lethal Protector, because that was basically setting up the standard for what Venom is right now in terms of him being an anti-hero. He's not somebody that just basically will just, I'm coming in to save the day.
Right.
No,
yeah, exactly.
he will kill you if you get out of line.
Exactly.
Or whatnot, if you're hurting other people who he considers innocent.
Exactly.
And it's one of those things that you don't see too often, where the heroes will take the villains to prison. That's what you used to see in the comic books.
Right.
This one, he'll just turn around and eat your brains, or eat whatever organs or whatever limbs off of you, just to sustain itself and still be part of the host it's still working around with.
Exactly. And one final point I want to make too as well. Obviously, we saw the film earlier
Yes, we
today.
did.
And at first I was very, very like dubious, or very suspect of how you're going to make a Venom without Spider-Man, because to me that's like having Batman without the Joker.
And I'm not going to lie, I had my doubts and suspicions about the film, because I honestly thought it was just going to be a piece of crap. Sony has a track record of doing
It's kind of like
Spider-Man
hit
films.
and miss.
It's been hit and miss, just like you said. And it's one of those things that I went into it with no expectations. I was just thinking, okay, let me just go into it with a clear mind, open mind, have some fun. And I was thoroughly surprised.
Yeah, so was I. And I'm glad it blew away the one that was portrayed in Spider-Man 3 back in the day, back in 2007. Because the one in Spider-Man 3, I'm not trying to say to speak against Topher Grace, because he tried to do a good job of being Venom in the film, but to shoehorn him in there at the last minute like that, straight terrible, just terrible. Like,
yeah, well, I have to agree with you. That was just not something you just do, because you're taking the material. You just threw him in there because the creative executives at Sony at the time said, oh no, this will work great. Let's just go ahead and throw him in there.
And it doesn't work that way.
No, you don't.
It doesn't work that way.
And you're mistreating the material, and as a result, you see what happens. The film was the worst of the three of the Tobey Maguire trilogy.
Well, at least this film that we saw, it respected the source material to a degree, and it also enabled Venom to be Venom without Spider-Man, because I was very, like, again, suspicious about that, because I was like, how are you going to have Venom without Spider-Man?
No, because that's like having Batman without the Joker.
Right, or Daredevil without Bullseye.
Exactly.
So,
and it's one of those things that not to cut you off, but I just have to say is that the fanboys have been more than ready to rip it apart. And my thing is, give it a chance.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a bad film. It may have semblances of old school comic book movies that were made back in the day in the 90s, in the early 2000s. But the thing is, just go into it with an open mind and just have some fun. Yeah, don't take it too seriously.
Yeah, check your brain at the door. That's just basically what you got to do. Check your brain at the door and just enjoy it. Have fun. Watch it for what it's worth. And it still sticks to the core value, the core of what Venom and who Venom is. And Venom being an anti-hero.
Exactly. And then as the film ends, you'll be mildly surprised with two things that you see in there, and I'm not going to give it away.
No, we're not giving anything away. Yeah, exactly.
Seen it yet. But anyway, this is the Comic Anthologist. If you want to reach us, you can reach us at the email, thecomicanthologist@gmail.com. And once again, thank you for showing your support. And also hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Until then,
exactly.
Peace.